So welcome to the session this afternoon. So I'm really pleased to have a really good friend of mine on the other side of the screen, and I'll introduce Jackee in a short while. But just really to say that for the next 45 minutes to an hour, we have this session today. We will be trying to make it as interactive as we can. I appreciate that everybody's on mute at the moment, and we'll be able to hopefully interact via the chat panel, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen. So please feel free to say hello to the other participants that are listening in, or to pose any questions to Jackee and I as we're going through the session today as well. So as I've mentioned, the chat panel, just a couple of other things around housekeeping. The first of them is always just to close down any other applications that you may have open. Of course, that enables you to focus on the conversation Jackee and I will be having, but also it just stops any problems with the transmission speed, because sometimes I know people experience a slow transmission speed, but usually that's because other applications are open. I would really encourage you to have a pen and paper handy. Of course, we're going to be talking about reflective writing and journaling, so just to role model that is great if you've got a pen and paper handy, because I'm sure there's going to be some wisdom that you're going to take from Jackee in terms of this topic today that you can apply to your practice. And so, yeah, I will pause at certain points just to see if there's any responses or questions from what we're discussing today on the session. So that's a bit about housekeeping. So really, in terms of Jackee, let me just introduce Jackee Holder, somebody I've known for a long time now. And I'd say, so let me explain what you do. You're an executive coach, you're a facilitator, you're a coach supervisor. I'd say you're a coach trainer, Jackee. I mean, I could go on in terms of your other aspects of your work as an interfaith minister. You've got a number of books that you've published, and for the people that are dialed in slightly early, Jackee and I were talking about the fact she's about shortly to publish her fourth book as well, on reflective writing. So Jackee, feel free to mention that at the end if you'd like to, but just really to say thank you for your time today and making the space to have this conversation with the group as well.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always one of my favourite subjects and conversations. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk and share with other coaches, because I think it's really, really important for our profession.
No, great. Thanks, Jackee. And so, Jackee, we're going to have a conversation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's better if we have a conversation, a dialogue around reflective writing, reflective practice, journaling for coaches. And I know you've been obviously talking about this all around the world, and running sessions, for instance, for coaching at work, etc. So I know it's a topic that I often discuss with the people that I'm supervising. So to make it useful for the participants today, what I'd just like to do is just take a moment to pause, and I'm just going to invite the group just to reflect in terms of what you would like to learn from this conversation today. What's going to ensure that this is a valuable investment in terms of your development as a coach, your coaching practice. So just take a couple of moments to reflect on those questions. What do you want to learn from this session today? Or what do you want to take from the session that will mean it's a valuable investment in terms of your practice as a coach, your development as a coach? And then if anything comes to mind, I'm just going to encourage you just to share with us on the chat panel, just so that Jackee and I get a sense of what you're hoping to get from the session today. And then as things come up on the chat panel, Jackee, we can just look at those. So please feel free to share any on the chat panel what you'd like to get from the session. Okay, so Carol's just asked, or shared how I can use reflective writing to improve my coaching. And Debbie has also shared what reflective writing can add to my practice. How to integrate it without having another thing on my to-do list, which we'll talk about, Jackee, in terms of time. Is there a style, structure of reflective writing that would serve us better as coaches? It's just come through from Sarah. Anne has shared what particular techniques are the most useful. And Nora has shared, I don't like to take notes during a coaching session. I prefer to listen. After the session, I do my write-ups, but find that I write down many assumptions or theories about the coachee that I don't share with the coachee. Claire, ideas for creative reflective journaling, things that Jackee knows now that she'd wish she'd known when she started. And Kimberly has also shared, what should I include in my reflective writing to best serve my coaching? So thank you for those. Thank you for sharing those. And again, feel free to add to those as we're going. And then one's just come through from Karen, how to make use of journaling with coachees, which is quite an interesting thought as well in terms of what we will cover. So if that's what you'd like to get from the session, I'm just going to ask you just to pause, and people that have trained with me in the past or trained with Jackee will be used to us asking this question. But the second question, you don't need to share this on the panel, on the chat panel. This is just for you, a bit of personal reflection. So how do you need to be to get the most from this session today? So this is the other side of your learning contract. Jackee and I are going to talk about these areas, but for you personally, how do you need to be to get the most from this session? So an example of that may be, I may need to be fully present. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a moment just to reflect on that. How do I need to be to get the most from this session? So Jackee, let's get into our dialogue. And when I was thinking about this conversation this morning, I was actually thinking probably the most useful place to start is probably the why. I mean, so in terms of what do you believe the benefits for coaches to undertaking a reflective practice or journaling? So I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts about that.
Great, and thank you, because already I'm thinking that the questions that have come through are really great questions, and I really want to speak to them. I think it's best to preface this that I've been journaling for over 30 years. I came out of youth and community work. That was where I trained as a youth worker. I did my degree at uni and then trained in youth work. And that really introduced me to a really strong element of reflective practice. It's almost like it's in my bones. It's like it's the way in which I approach my work. And what I particularly liked about that as a young woman is journaling and reflective practice helped me to make better sense of what I was doing and gain a better understanding about the work that I was doing with young people and young adults at the time over in Hackney. And that has really run through as a very strong current to my practice, in which I brought into coaching. And I think there are so many important benefits, Damion. I think, first of all, I would say that for me, let's just take journaling to begin with, because I think journaling is more around your own personal reflections. So this is about your own personal practice, your own personal growth, but it does overlap with your professional development as well. Well, I think there's a strong element of self-care. I see journaling as a restorative practice. Now, you're a mindfulness trainer and teacher, and you know how important it is for mindfulness to grow yourself as a coach, as a supervisor, as a leader. For me, when I am journaling, that is my form of mindfulness and my form of personal reflective practice. So that's the first thing. I also see how it has been a way of connecting all the different parts of ourselves. So if we think about in coaching, when you do the psychological aspects of coaching, we teach around subpersonalities. We've got all these different parts of the selves, and sometimes they're very disparate. They're very fragmented. Sometimes we don't find a way of bringing them all together. And what I've noticed about journaling is I can speak to each of those parts of myself. I can give voice to them. I can express them. I can explore them on the page, probably in a way that I wouldn't be able to explore them in relationship with other people. And we can think about this in terms of our work relationships, in terms of our clients, in terms of our family systems, in terms of how we go about meeting strangers in our daily work. It's a really wonderful way of processing all the stuff that we're kind of coming our way as we go through our day. And it's interesting because a psychological problem often manifests in the body in a physiological way. So if there are things that come up emotionally, we know all the time in terms of working with our clients that we are working with the emotional material, we're working with the interior world of the coachee, which is about feelings and emotions, and we know how important EQ is. Well, then, you have to be able to find a way to express those emotions. And some of that is how it manifests, but also journaling has very positive benefits for our physiological health and well-being. So when people have been known to journal and talk about their emotions and their feelings, they have improved their immune system, they have lowered their stress levels, they visit medical centres less. Their whole physiological construct has improved. And, we're not just talking about one or two little pilot research studies, we're talking about a huge body of evidence-based research from the work of James Pennebaker, who primarily focused on writing about trauma. Now, maybe in coaching, not as many coaches might be working with the grit of trauma, but actually many of our clients come with a history of trauma. And, you can define trauma in so many different ways. And what Pennebaker found was getting people to write for 3 to 4 consecutive days for 15 to 20 minutes. And in a way, it was a way of people making sense of their past, because often it is past experiences that is impacting current performance, productivity, well-being. So all of these things impact on what shows up in the room between coach and coachee. So journaling is a great way of making sense of all of those things. We also have lots of research trials now, and this is getting better and better in terms of the research findings. They've done research trials and studies with cancer patients, and cancer patients who wrote about their emotions and feelings as they were going through cancer treatment have actually responded far more positively to the recovery. They've recovered better and faster. The same with rheumatoid arthritis. So these are really, really interesting study benefits that are showing the impact of journaling. So if we're thinking about, one of the things that we used to talk in the coach training that I've done with you is that we leave choice, awareness and responsibility with the coachee. And what I've noticed about journaling is the moment the client has the pen in the hand, you're leaving responsibility with them, because you just don't know. It is just amazing, Damion, what people get in contact with through moving from their conscious mind into the unconscious mind. So often clients come with problems, challenges, trials and tribulations in all different guises. And the thinking mind is probably doing the same thinking that is always done. So how do we as coaches interrupt that thinking? And I think we have to have a number of different approaches. So just something as simple as getting a client to write about their day. How are they arriving? Sometimes it can take a whole session for a client to actually say what's really on their mind. Whereas a 5-minute journaling practice, either pre-session. So one of the things I do is I get my clients to do prep and wrap forms. So they'll fill out a form before they come to the session. That's really important because the client is in control. They're often using handwriting as opposed to that distraction that happens when we go on our laptops and our computers and our phones. So you're talking about creating space And when you create space, you have much more qualitative thinking time. And the client will often really connect with what's important and what is meaningful. So now awareness and responsibility is with the client. They are coming knowing that they have connected to what's important for them. And sometimes it's often stuff that they didn't think was the thing. You know, we talk about the presenting issue is not always the real issue. Writing just has this ability to just really cut to the bone, to really go to the heart of what's important.
Sure. Can I just come in there? Because
I do talk a lot, don't I?
No. There's a number of things you've touched on that I think are useful. Just reflecting.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm going to use a bit of my language around it, but that sense of actually as coaches, as we're starting to journal and develop, you know, reflective practice through journaling, there's that sense of creating more of a meta-awareness in terms of what we're experiencing as a coach, what's happening for the client, and the impact the coaching is having on us, you know, in terms of, you spoke about the restorative nature, but we think about the context that, you know, we're working in terms of the organizational system. You know, I think that's a wonderful thing to think about in terms of how do we keep ourselves that sort of inner compass in terms of the work that we're doing, and I'm hearing that writing could be one of those mechanisms. So,
but even the way you've just described that, you've gone meta to the system. Look at how much data is there. So what do we do with all of that in terms of really making sense of that, of really mining it, of really being able to, you know, really drill down, drill through, unlayer, unravel? To me, that is what makes, so one of the questions was, you know, how can I make good use of journaling for myself as a coach, for my coachees? For me, you know, it's almost like you can almost smell, breathe, really sense the presence of coaches who are engaged in a regular reflective practice. See, one of the key skills around reflective practice is you become a better observer. You become a better observer of what you're seeing, what you're sensing, what you're feeling, what's going on. Somebody raised already around assumptions. Well, for me, it's the actual reflection that allows me to check in with the assumptions that I might be making. And often there is stuff that we miss. There's stuff that we don't see. There's an interesting, there's lots of lovely quotes around, you know, journaling, reflective practice. And one of the things that, one of the questions was, what would I wish I would know now that I didn't know when I first started journaling? And one of the things that I felt like I spent years and years being really introspective in my journal, but I wasn't that good at going back and reflecting on what I wrote in my journal. So one of the things I really encourage coaches to do is to really harness and really value the practice of the action of doing reflection on their writing and their reflection. So it's like going back. Keep going back. What did I notice there? What am I feeling? What is the themes that are emerging? What am I missing? What am I not seeing here? What more could I be doing? Really asking those questions that really hopes to really create that meta view that you spoke about, Damion.
Yeah. And can I just come in again? So, because, you know, I suppose you said, you know, in terms of tasting and feeling or seeing a coach that has a reflective practice, and as a supervisor, you know, often the output of that ongoing reflection, those themes that they're noticing, is taking that into supervision to make sense of. I wanted to go back because you spoke a bit about starting to take this into our work with clients, because I was just thinking about that whole piece around, you know, your examples of research that's been carried out, and obviously with the amount of, you know, mental health issues that are in organizational systems now, and you know, again, journaling being another tool or resource that we can share with our clients. So with that in mind, to make this practical, because you sort of said that you do a prep and a wrap form afterwards with your clients, What are some of the questions that you might be asking your clients to reflect on before they come to coaching, Jackee? Just in terms so they can connect to what's most
Yeah.
important to them, just to make this pragmatic for the participants that are listening.
Yeah. So I often just ask a very general question like, what's happened since we last spoke? So that gives the client an opportunity to do a bit of a scan. You know, what has been happening? You know, what have been the important things? What have been the challenging things? Very often clients miss the good things that has been happening. So they're so focused on what hasn't been working well that they've missed the things that have worked well. And we want to bring those in because we know from the research that when clients wrote down 3 good things at the end of the day, it really improved their self-confidence, their self-efficacy, their productivity and their performance. So we want to harness more of that. So we want so that clients are feeling resourceful in, you know, what we know are very complex and challenging situations. We ask questions like, what would you know, what's this, what is the thing that is most troubling you or challenging you at this particular time? What is the thing that you should be thinking about that you're not thinking about? Because very often what clients are coming with are things that are very urgent or things that other people are making important to them, but they haven't found a way sometimes of making sense of what's really important to them, what's their priorities, what are the meaningful things that they want to be working on that will really enhance their levels of satisfaction and productivity in their work. So those questions that really invite them to take a much closer look at their own internal self, their own thinking self. And, you know, I think part of this is also, you know, do you know the work of Cal Newport? Have you heard about him?
No.
Well, you know, I'd really like to recommend that as a book for everyone on the call. Cal Newport, he's a lecturer, but he's written a really great book called Deep Work. And it's all about the need for creating more space in your day to do that deep work. That work that is meaningful, that work, you know, so like for me, what I would call my deep work is reflective practice, is journaling. That's the work that really underpins everything that I'm interested in. I think for you, Damion, if I could be so presumptuous, I would say it's like mindfulness. You know, that is the deep work that you have got a deeper inquiry into. And everybody has something that they're interested in that I feel like with the reflective practice, you get an opportunity to really make sense of what that deep work is. Now, you asked me to make this practical. I think answering just one of those questions can be enough to really, it's like opening up an accordion. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot in there, and even just one question. So we think about 5-minute writing sprints, 7-minute writing sprints, 10-minute writing sprints. And I say a sprint because one of the things that we suggest to people is when you're doing your reflecting, it is about slowing down, but sometimes to do the writing, and if you're kind of new to writing, you might want to write fast, first of all. And the idea behind that is you write fast so that you, first of all, you can bypass your inner critic. Your inner critic likes to go at 35 miles an hour. When you're writing at 70 miles an hour, it's harder for your inner critic to keep up with you. And the inner critic is one of the greatest resistances to people actually giving themselves permission to really just allow themselves to free flow in terms of their thinking, their thoughts, their reflections. And we want to generate that space where people don't have to have it all orderly, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to make sense. The sense comes from the reflection. So you don't have to worry about grammar, punctuation, style, structure, which actually we know that for many of our clients, in terms of their belief systems, that can be something that gets in the way. And it's really interesting. There was a piece of research at Harvard which looked into the quality of a reflective practice in learning. And what they found was that people are more predispositioned to want to be doing something rather than doing nothing. So it's almost like we've gone from, you know, being hardwired to feeling like it's okay to take a walk and do a wander, or to just sit and think and daydream, to we've always got to be occupied. So that can, you know, there has to be some unlearning that goes with the reflective practice. There has to be unlearning that goes with the writing. And I think one of the key things is, what really helps me is scheduling my writing into my diary. You know, like the same way we would schedule in a meeting, actually writing it down. So I know that first things in the morning, I will deliberately go out of my way to get to, you know, the other side of London or wherever I'm heading off to, an hour or two early, just so I can have some time to do my personal journaling and then some reflective journaling. So, you know, last week I had loads of coaching clients, and it's really important to reflect on the work that I did with them. One piece of work, when I did my reflection on each client, it was amazing. I saw all these themes that came out of each of the individual clients that I worked with, even though they were all different and had their own sort of identity. There were some very key themes that came out of the work. Now, I could miss that if I'm not reflecting. And that's going to inform the work that I'm doing. So I'm coming to the work more resourced as a coach. And that's what you want.
No, great. And it reminds me of when I'm teaching mindfulness, I always say to people, you know, the time to practice is not going to miraculously appear. You need to make the time. So there's something about, you know, scheduling it in our diaries is one way that we can build in, I suppose, not just the reminder, but the space to journal. I heard you say about the sprints, you know, which I really like, the 5 minute, 7 minute sprints. If they're, you know, because I imagine, like, you know, sometimes getting a journal and it's an empty book and thinking about, well, what am I supposed to be writing here?
Yeah.
What other resources or models or frameworks do you know, Jackee, that might be helpful for people who are listening that they could bring into their own practice? So something to give them a bit of structure.
Yes, I think that's a really good question. I want to introduce people to a model from Kathleen Adams. She's one of the thought leaders in the USA around journaling and therapeutic and expressive writing, because these are all offshoots of reflective writing, because very often you're exploring, you're inquiring. And she created something called the journal ladder, Damion. And it came out of, very often when you go on reflective writing courses, or you go on writing for well-being, for example, very often one of the first exercises that people are introduced to is free writing. So the idea is that you've got your blank journal or your notebook, and you just write about whatever comes into your mind. And that can be so liberating for some people. It can give them a freedom to just express themselves. And often they write about things that they wouldn't expect themselves to be writing about. And it's really, a lot of things are unearthed and a lot of things are brought to the surface. And for other people, it is absolutely scary. It's like they have no idea what they want to say. They feel really, really resistant. So what Kathleen did was that she noticed that her clients kind of fell into two camps, and she realized that some clients, it's just too daunting to do the free writing. So she created what she called this ladder. And at one end is like free writing as a tool that some people really get. And at the other end of the continuum, it's a bit like having a continuum actually, is what she calls sentence stems, writing prompts. These are much more structured, reflective writing exercises that are short, that are simple sentences or a word that invites the writer with a prompt that prompts them onto the page with something to think about. So one of the things I love to ask my clients to write about when they come into sessions on a luggage tag is, how am I arriving? So here we go. It's not a blank sheet of paper. You know, luggage tags are really, they just seem to work. I don't know what it is about them. But, you know, they're short, they're small, they're easy to carry around. And I often have them in lots of different colours. And that way, people can start to think about, well, how am I arriving? How am I in my body? How am I feeling? What am I thinking about? And already you've got questions being generated. Yeah, and so the writing prompt, so I have stacks of different questions that I just invite people to sometimes pick one, ask yourself one, or even better, I say to people, what's the question that you have to ask yourself today? And you get them to start to do that own inner inquiry. And I never ever, the same thing happens. People start to write and they often don't want to stop. Because again, going back, there is so much in the interior self that wants to come out. All it needs is a kind of nudge or a prompt. So in my book, 49 Ways to Write Yourself Well, there's some loads of writing prompts in there. There's also a really good book, and I'm not sure if I bought it with me, but it's called Coach Yourself. It's Mark something, and I'll share this with you so you can add it to any notes or anything that you send out. He's got some wonderful reflective writing quotes in there for coaches, and I'd highly recommend that book as well. But sometimes it just requires something really, really simple, like what do I really want to talk about today? What's the hardest thing for me to talk about today? What's going to, Mark Bisson, thank you very much. I've just seen it come up, Claire. Great book. He really synthesizes things down, particularly for the coaching community. So I won't take up time here, but, there's lots of resources that your coaches can actually use to get going. And just to say, in between all of that, you've got things like get clients to just make a list, write a list. I find sometimes that the thought of writing a narrative or something structured can be it's like overwhelmed people. We're just bombarded by words, but lists are very doable. So you can do lists of what's on my mind, what's really going on at work, how do I feel in the workplace. A list feels more manageable, it feels more tangible, things like that. There's things on the journal ladder like a character sketch. A character sketch can be a description of how you're feeling. How do you want to be feeling? What's your ideal self? What would your best self like to be feeling? How would you describe yourself if you were looking on yourself as an observer? What do you see? How are you standing? What are you wearing? How are you holding yourself? These are really creative ways, because what the brain, in terms of neuroscience, the brain likes to be interrupted. It likes to not have the same patterns happen all the time. So these are very, very useful tools to one of the questions was about being creative with journaling tools. This is what we want to do. We want to really juice up the work that we're doing with our clients. So we're really not just doing the same old thing with our clients all the time. Let me think about some of the other things that I captured in terms, dialogues are really good. Mm-hmm. Having dialogues around conversations that you want to have, having dialogues with parts of yourselves. The other day I wrote to my knee. My knee, I've had a sports injury for a very long time from playing netball. I used to play at county level. And it's been as I've got older, it's really been flaring up and really been giving me a few more problems. And the other day I noticed that it had really kind of not been feeling really good. So I wrote to the knee as a way of inquiring about what was I really feeling? How was I carrying myself through my day that was impacting my physiology? Now, a client might come in and they might not know what it is that's wrong with them, but they might know that a part of their body is actually aching. Actually having that dialogue, one of the things that I really got, I'm carrying too much heavy stuff. My knee needs more downtime. It really gave me a lot of insights into my self-care, into my well-being. Now, earlier you mentioned that about mental health. 1 in 4 people are likely to suffer from mental health and well-being. So if we don't pay attention to what's going on internally, physically, writing can be a really good way, a gentle way, a creative way. a challenging way to really do some of that inquiry. So those are some of the things.
Yeah, no, great, Jackee. Great, Jackee. And the comedian in me wants to say, did the knee right back yet? Or, no, I'm joking, don't worry. So
Well,
let's just...
the knee did speak back, didn't
Yeah,
it?
I know. Let's just go to the group, though. You know, just where we are in terms of making this practical for you. What else would be useful for Jackee to share at the moment? Because obviously, you know, you've had some thoughts around some approaches and models you could use, you know, booking the time in your diary, the idea of structured, unstructured writing. What else would be useful for you to hear at the moment?
Can I also notice that Kimberly asked a question about data protection?
Yeah, I was going to come to that in a moment, Jackee, if that's okay. Well, while we're waiting, and perhaps if you want to talk to that in terms of, because obviously GDPR especially has been on everyone's minds, but you know, what are your thoughts around data protection then in terms
I
of...
think we do need to think about that a lot more, given the new legislation and data protection that has been brought in. And I think there is a way of thinking about what are the notes that you have about your clients that are a reflection of your overall work with your clients, and what are the notes that are about your own personal reflection and inquiry into your journey as a coach that you might use for your supervision and you might use for your general practice that is not part of the notes that you keep on your client work. So I think those are very important questions to ask of yourself. So I tend to keep some very general notes about the work with my clients and some more deeper reflective notes that I reflect on with my client, with myself. And I like to think that anything that I'm reflecting on in our work together is data that I might bring into my conversations with my clients as well. But really just I think it's important to bring that to supervision and have a conversation about it. How do we do this? Because I think we're continually working on this.
Yeah, and as you say, just being mindful of what we record in relationship to the client versus our own practice and reflections on ourselves. So, you know, you've spoken a bit about obviously application to us, Jackee, but also in terms of how we could start to use this with our clients. I suppose just any sort of experience around how you normalize this for people, so you make it something that, because I'm imagining, so this is again my own experience at the moment, but for a lot of leaders, you know, in terms of coaching and really getting the most out of coaching and enabling them to learn from reflection, this could be such a critical skill that they're missing. So I just wonder how we could position this with our clients so it feels part of the coaching process, because I'm imagining, like, for example, with a lot of my clients, if there's something they're working on, I'll set them a question to reflect on between sessions based on their experience. So how do you position this to make it, I suppose it's okay to do this? It doesn't feel...
I think that's a lovely question, and I'm going to give you it based on a personal experiences. So I've worked with quite a lot of senior leaders and CEOs of like big companies, you know. So I'm saying that because like sometimes we can think that the higher up a position a leader is in an organization, the more the tendency is, oh, maybe we can't use these kinds of exercises and processes. Well, there was one CEO of a major children's organization who, when I bought out some coloured paper, some letter-headed paper, and some luggage tags, just completely looked like he'd got lost in a sweetie shop and was like, oh my God, what are we going to do with this? Tell me more. This is really good. Because it was a way of breaking the way in which he was used to working, and it was about time for him, and he could really see the value. He was really beginning to see the value that he was getting in creating, I guess, Nancy Klein's kind of time to think. So it was about a qualitative approach to who he was being as a leader. And noticing, one of the things that they found in the research at Harvard was that people are more likely to want, I said it earlier, sorry, that people are more likely to want to be doing something than thinking about it. But he began to see how taking time to step back, to have thinking time, and to engage in a bit more creativity actually got him to be more creative about his team, the teams that he was leading, to be more creative and insightful and actually inspirational on a, you know, on a strategic level with how he was leading the organization. But it started by really going back to, you know, I like to think about it like sometimes we have to bring in some of those tools that really catalyze, and you know, that's not, there's no pun lost on the name of your company, Damion, in terms of being a catalyst for really connecting in with the creative child that lives within all of us, you know, really bringing that back to life again. But more than anything, I think the way that you can really normalize this is if you normalize it for yourself. You know, there is a real congruency that comes between having this as a practice that you hold, that you embody as a coach, that enables you to really bring this into your work and to talk about it. So when I talk about journaling, my coachees really get that this is something that is a part of my, you know, professional and personal practice. And I think that people really, that's a way to model it. I get clients to also do it in the moment. There's nothing like, should we write for 5 minutes? The other day I asked a coaching client, I asked them a question and they said, oh no, you know, there's nothing else that I want to say on this. And then I just kind of pushed them a little bit further and I said, well, do you want to take 5 minutes to just write, see if there's anything that comes and just write about it? 5 minutes went and they didn't want to stop. And they just went to somewhere completely different that was very transformational, that wasn't even in their sphere of thinking to begin with, when they came up with a very clear, no, I don't think there's anything else there. And I, in a way, had to come out of my own comfort zone in that moment by just trusting some of my intuition, but actually having like different structures, different exercises that you're just willing to play with your coaches with. And I always think of it as like offering. You're offering them something and they will decide whether they want to take it or not. So I'm never attached to whether a coachee wants to practice something or try something. And sometimes they come up with something better themselves. And actually, one more thing on that, Damion, I do a lot of telephone coaching. And I have noticed more and more that I have longer and longer silences on my calls because coaches are reflecting and writing on the call. And they'll say to me, oh, Jackee, can I just have a few more minutes? Because I'm actually writing that down. So I know that by introducing the writing, so I always invite all my coaches to have a notebook when you come to a session. You know, have pen and paper, because we never know what will come up in a session.
Great, thank you. And I know we've spoken about making the time and perhaps putting it in your diary, but just again, I'm thinking about some clients. Let's use clients rather than us as coaches that may feel we're too busy. You know, we've got so much on, we've got so many meetings. How can I find the space to actually do this? Now, you've sort of shared some ideas around that already, like perhaps we're just capturing a word or, you know, having a sentence or something, but what have you found works with people, you know, just to slowly sort of build something into their routine?
Do you know, I talk a lot about one word is a journal entry, one line is a journal entry, one sentence is a journal entry. So let's just take an example of one word. You might just write down a word, say you write down quality, just the word quality. Now, the fact that you planted it on the page somewhere, or some form of paper or something that you've recorded it on, it becomes more ablaze in your mind. So that often what happens is that people find that without even having to actively think about it, it becomes a meditation on its own. And the meditation becomes an inquiry into, what does that word relate to? What does that word mean? What is equality about? So already you're doing the thinking. So one of the things that I also get people to think about is, you can be doing some writing in your brain when you're washing the dishes, or you're doing something with your hands that's giving you thinking time. And the fact that you've captured that one word or that one line or that one sentence, and then you do some thinking in between, often gives you something to come back to the page with. And that's, I think, is the thing that people are sometimes afraid of. Do you know that quote by Ernest Hemingway? He had, he had this catchphrase, which he said, he always used to leave his writing knowing what it was he wanted to say next, so that when he came back to the page, he knew where to start. And sometimes it is a bit of anxiety about knowing where to start or knowing where we're going, because of course sometimes in the writing actually leads us, sometimes not the other way round. So, you know, there is a bit of surrendering to the process, but sometimes you have to find your hook first of all to get onto the page.
Thank you.
Does that make sense, Damion?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And that sort of wild mind writing that you were talking about in terms of those sprints, you know, is a great way to I suppose, to apply that as well. But so I just want to check in again, so if it's okay, Jackee, just around, you know, if there are any other questions that people have come up whilst we've been talking, or just any other questions about using this for ourselves or with our clients, just so I can make sure that we're answering all the questions that you've asked so far.
I like what Claire says about the HBR article, that the more seen you are, the more journalism is an essential skill. I think that's so key.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's absolutely right. And the more research that is done around reflection as an activity and a practice, the more that is really being scientifically proven. And I think that's really, really important. I'm going to have a look for that article, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, as maybe people are thinking, do you know, another thought that I had that I wanted to share was around the practice of journaling and reflection is what has made me a writer. It's created content. It's solidified my thoughts. It's synthesized my ideas. It's created great quality content for CPD, for assessment centres, for articles. If you want to go on and do research, there are so many benefits. And I was actually also thinking about our profession. And, you know, one of the things that sometimes I get asked is, like, a lot of people who are new to coaching would love to observe and watch coaches doing what they do. And of course, that's not always possible. But one of the ways that we can really share the quality of our learning in a really qualitative way is through case studies, by writing case studies. And of course, the best case studies come out of being observant, being reflective, by capturing what it is you're experiencing. And captured moments are another one of the models and approaches on that, the journal ladder by Kathleen Adams. And it's almost like, if you can really capture a moment from your coaching and really write about it in detail, a lot of qualitative data comes back to you from that. And in a way, I think that there is so much that we can learn from the training of therapists as we expand our work as coaches. Some of those practices, I think, are going to be really, really essential for the growth of our industry and the quality of the work that we're doing with our clients, as that psychological mindedness is is required more of us as coaches.
I agree, and I think, we're, after the coach leaves, we're trying to create the skills so the coachee can continue this, without the coach. So I think that's
Absolutely.
why I feel such resonance when you're talking about using this with your clients. And the other thing I just wanted to reflect back, is a conversation that most coaches have, is, who am I as a coach, and what's the work I really want to do? And we used to have this saying that we need to work with 100 clients before you'll really understand who you are as a coach. It's something that was always, I suppose, voiced in our profession, but actually with reflective practice, it's a way for you to really get under the surface around the work that you want to do and who you are. So that's the other benefit I see with coaches that do journal and reflect.
I think that's so key. And I think the thing that captures that, Damion, is it really helps you cultivate and craft your presence and your identity as a coach. It is what can make you stand out in an assessment center, because you have been able to really knit that all together and make sense of it. It doesn't mean you have to be the best coach in the world. It doesn't mean you have to have the most clients, but it means you have to have had that inquiry and it being an ongoing relationship that you're having with yourself. And that really does make a difference. Great,
Jackee. So just a final check-in question before we go to the group, but I suppose, what else haven't we spoken about that, from your experience, in terms of what's really important in really helping us develop a reflective practice or journaling? I mean, what else would you say that you haven't said already?
Well, I think one of the things is not to get complacent about not doing it. I think it is something that it's very easy for time to siphon off that, the importance and the value of being reflective. And I can just see and feel it, the difference in me when I am not doing it regularly, because, the demands of the schedule kind of take over, and how it is when I come back to the page. And it's almost like a breath of fresh air. It's like taking a pause. It's like kind of re-energizing and refocusing. And it just makes my work so much more enjoyable, more impactful, just more alive and engaged. And that's what we want. And so I worked with a group of social work students last week in a university, and I didn't realize that half of them didn't want to talk about reflective practice because they felt that they had been made to reflect. And that there was a real challenge around, well, why do we have to do this? And by the end of the day of working together, over 20 of them, their heads were never coming up from the end every time I set a writing exercise. Do you know what I mean? Something settled in them where they found a place where they began to make sense of why this may be beneficial to who they are. It's a bit like what we learned when we trained as coaching supervisors. Who you are is how you coach. Who you are is how you supervise. And this is key to who you are. It's what shapes us.
Yeah, no, wonderful. I've just seen a question come through from Sarah.
Yeah.
Just in terms of, how soon after a session is the best time, really, is a power phrase, to reflect. So again, what would your thoughts be around that, Jackee?
I try not to be prescriptive, but I'll say what I do. I am much better. I get my first sort of thoughts down as soon as I can after the session, because it is very easy for me to go to my next thing and kind of lose sight of some of the real gems that might have happened in the moment. So it's really important for me to try and capture things. And then what I tend to do is I write things out as they come to me, no particular order. And then I leave space in between each line, and then I go back and write in between the lines. And that is the most productive way that I reflect, because it's almost like I layer on my observations and the questions that are emerging within me, either about me and how I'm working with the client, or what I'm noticing, what the emerging themes. But you know, Sarah, you have to find the practice that works for you. Some people see, you know, quite a few clients in a day, so therefore they may not have the time to do that. But I think it's about having a dedicated time when you do it. And it doesn't have to be long, but really be flexible in it. I've just gone past, you know, being prescriptive, because we're just such unique, brilliant human beings. How can we just prescribe one way of doing things? You have to make it your own.
Thanks, Jackee. Thank you. So as a way of just closing the circle, really, it'd just be great just to see some reflections around what you're personally taking away from this conversation. So again, please feel free to add these to the chat panel, but it'd just be great for Jackee and I to get a sense of what's been valuable for you. So what are you taking away from this conversation? And whilst people are reflecting on that, we started to get some come through. So I just wanted to say thank you, Jackee, in terms of your time. I mean, I really experienced your passion. I know of it, but obviously experienced it in this conversation in terms of your own reflective writing practice, but also your work with coaches and supervisors and others in terms of developing this. So we're just starting to see some comments coming through.
Yeah.
And I suppose, you know, what I'm starting to see is just the impact on us, but also the work we're doing with our coachees as well. Yeah, and also Carol there saying that she can put some time in her calendar to reflect on this further. So yeah, really appreciate your time. So after this session, just so everybody's listening, you will get sent a link so you can listen back to the session again. We're send some other resources round to you, so the books that have been referenced, just so that you know, you have those. Sarah, Claire's also said she's going to send me the link for the HBR article.
Brilliant.
So I'll make sure that goes round as well. And really just to say, I hope you can join the next webinar, which will be on Thursday, the 21st of June at 2 o'clock UK time. And that will be with Helen Cowan. And the title of the session is called Taking the Lead on Leave. So Helen is a coach that specializes in working with people in transition, usually people that are maybe going off on maternity leave or returning to work. And Helen will be talking about her own experiences of setting up her own coaching business, finding her niche as a coach, but then also specifically about the work that she's doing. So I hope everyone can make the time to join that session as well. So thanks again, Jackee. Thank you to everybody who's joined the call. And,
great questions, by the way. Thanks. I really love the questions that came from the community. Fabulous.
Great. And yeah, look forward to connecting with everyone else again shortly.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.